All right. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to TSD meeting. It's a public and recorded meeting. Today, as you saw from my email sent out yesterday, the agenda is a little bit of a mishmash of topics. First, I thought we would just briefly mention where we are with respect to releasing ONOS Classic this Friday. And then we can talk about a variety of micro-ONOS topics. The release process again, upgrade to go, and so forth. As you can see the agenda here on my screen. So with respect to the ONOS Classic, Ray, do you want to give an update?
Yeah, so I made the support branch for 2.3 yesterday. Hit some problems trying to regenerate the JJB. So I'm waiting for Zach. He said he knows how to fix it. So basically right now you can check in, but there are no verified jobs. So once Zach fixes the environment, I can rerun the JJB builder and we will have verification jobs against the 2.3 bug fix branch. Okay. But the idea is once everything is together and the verification jobs work, I will do another RC, but this time off of the 2.3 branch rather than off the master branch, and then we should be ready to release.
Perfect. Okay. And so because the support branch has been created, I've asked QA to build off of the head of that branch and to run their full suite of tests, functionality, performance and skill tests and HA tests. So they can give it thumbs up, thumbs down.
Ray, there is a patch that I merged this morning and I'd like to get into 2.3.
You can just cherry pick it, that's fine. Yeah.
The
problem is you'll have to do the verification by hand or wait. That's up to you.
Okay. How can I check if it's already in 2.3? I just check out the branch?
Yeah, just pull it and then do a git log and look at the change
okay,
log.
Sounds good. Will do.
So I think we're on track for releasing this Friday. So associated with that, this is a repeat of my another email from yesterday. Next week, I think it's Tuesday, unless I'm mistaken, we have a review meeting for this release and a planning for the next release, planning for the 2.4 release.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, see if you can clear a slot on your calendar. It should be just 1 hour meeting in the morning. I will be sending out the slides so that people can start putting in the content for both the review as well as planning for next release. So unless there are any questions on ONOS Classic, I think we can slide over to ONOS config. Sorry, micro-ONOS. All right, so Andrea has done a lot of great work in researching the kind of the nooks and crannies of the release process for micro-ONOS, specifically for ONOS config to begin with. There's a document that he put up that we've discussed on a couple of different occasions in this meeting. But we still haven't really done any kind of, as far as I know, hands-on work to actually try it out. We haven't tried to run the 0.x release like we said we wanted to do. That's clearly it's not something that Andrea is going to be able to drive because of his current role. So that's something that's probably going to have to fall on probably Ray, myself, or with maybe help of Zach. Do we have any other update in that area?
No, that's a perfect update, Tom. I think that yeah, getting the help of Zach is definitely something that you guys could look at. I can also be of help. I just cannot really be the direct executor of the things, also because it's something that I don't expect having on my plate in the future. So I can definitely be there if there is something unclear in the process or there is some discussions to be had. I'll be happy to join. Yeah, that's the current status of how things are. Having Zach would make a huge difference because he helped me a lot in making sure the process was right.
Right. Okay. So I think we'll probably just start working on it next week once ONOS Classic is out the door and we have some of the logistical issues behind us with ONOS Classic. All right, thanks, Andrea. And again, thanks for the documentation work that you did in that shared doc. Sean, you put up the next 2 items on there. Do you want to drive through those? I don't know. Is Sean on? I thought I saw him.
He is. I guess his mic is not working because he tried to unmute, but not really.
Okay. Well, what we can do is we can skip over those 2 items maybe while Sean is figuring out his audio setup, and we can dive into the onit enhancements. Is that something you, Adip, or Jordan want to drive?
Right. Go ahead, Jordan. Are you online? I can do it as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Adib. I'll do that.
Right. Okay. So in the last few weeks, we added some features. Ray added iterator flag that we can run multiple tests. So and also there are multiple PRs in the ONOS test. So we added a slice parameter that we should be able to run multiple test suites. So I also added a command for history. We should be able, for example, if you run a multiple test, so we would like to see, because it's a job. So when it's done, we would like to see that if this job is complete or not, the test is successful or not. So we can get the list of the tests, benchmarks, and also the details about each test. For example, which image that test was running, and which tests have been executed, if they are successful or not. So these features have been added. Some of them are still in the PR, so probably we'll measure in the next few days. So our plan is to add more features. One of the most important features that we would like to add is that we should store logs, and probably we need some sort of mechanism to collect these logs, and then we should be able to visualize them, especially for the subsystems. So we should be able to see that what's going on in each of the subsystems, which is good for the debugging. So anything else that you want to add, Ray, about the contributions or?
No, just the test and suite used to be a single thing, and now you can specify multiple of them. So the idea is, as the library we have of unit tests gets bigger, we want to be able to do sort of silo testing. That was the idea behind adding these flags. They're not really vitally required now, but long-term we'll like them. So.
Ray?
Okay, sounds like we have Sean back on.
Yeah, I just was checking if you could hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Good, okay.
So,
continue.
Does that cover the onit? Or
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's it.
Okay.
If Jordan wants to add something, go ahead.
Nope. That's it.
All right. In that case, we can sort of resume the regular agenda then. Sean, do you want to take the Go 113 and model plugin stuff?
Yes, yeah. So the 113 was something that was brought up in the context of discussions with Juniper. Damien asked about it, and really I didn't have a good answer, and I was wondering what the team thinks of it. There's a link there that shows what the new features of 113 are. Really, I don't think there's a big deal, but if we're going to make the transition, it came out in September, we probably should jump, I think, at some stage. I'm not really sure what it involves. Is it at the makefile or at the go.mod level that the change would have to happen? Do we know?
Well, one thing that Adib mentioned was he tried this when it first came out, and we had some problems with our tooling down the line. Like the Golang CI stuff wasn't working with 113. I always worry about the IDEs. IDEs are very fussy when you upgrade SDKs. So I think this is the kind of thing where someone would have to just say, hey, I'm going to try to do this, and then just, if it works, then everybody switches over. The changes seem to be a lot of changes to how modules are handled. which is good because Go is terrible at handling modules. So I think this is probably something we want to do.
So yeah, so I definitely am full agreement that we should adopt early, because if you let it slip and wait till 1.14 comes out, it then becomes much more difficult to jump that the larger gap.
Yep.
And especially in this phase of a project when it's not necessarily ready, it's not deploying into production anytime that we see, right? It's definitely time to keep up with the infrastructure fairly aggressively. Not sure whether we ought to wait till 0.x is done, where it should fall with the priority. I think we should cut out 0.2x or potentially even 1.x, and then do the upgrade.
I think we should wait until after.
We can start testing on all local machines.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and before change the change, I don't think it would be difficulties at the.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll open an issue and I'll leave it there, marking that it's to be done after the release.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and so like Adip said, if developers want to start working with 1.13 on their machines already, that's perfectly fine. I just don't want, if there's any structural changes, with how we treat with the modules, I don't think we should start making those changes until after 1x is out the door.
So guys, this is Kieran from Juniper. I was looking at this with Damien because we've been using 1.13 for our other projects. And I mean, everything, we were looking at ONOS config, everything seemed to be working okay, except that that some of the implicit dependencies in the go.mod file were different when we built with 1.13. So we weren't able to commit the files and we had to revert back to 1.12 to, be able to contribute to the project. So that was sort of like the background.
I see.
Okay.
So, but is it just the dependencies, or is there actually structural changes done to the make files?
The dependencies was the only thing that we noticed. We just changed the Go binary that we use, and back to 1.12, and then it generated a slightly different go.mod file. But there could be other changes, but that was the only thing that we noticed.
Okay.
If that is the case, and there's no major change required, we might as well upgrade.
Well, just to caveat that, I mean, there's lots of things in µONOS that we don't know about. That was just the project that we looked at.
Last time I tried a few months ago, I had some linter issues, but I think probably that's resolved.
I think if we bump up the version of the linters, I think we'll be okay based on what I read on their website.
Yeah, I just so primary motivation for my comment was earlier was just I didn't want to kind of open a can of worms. That's all it is. But if you see that it's just basically changing the Go binaries and slightly changing the dependencies, that's because we rev those periodically anyway, right? To me, that's not an issue. I don't want that to be the blocker for moving to there before the release.
Yeah.
So if you can do that just with these few things, then by all means we can move on forward with that.
Okay.
But I just want us to open a can of worms and then be deferring the release for until we address those things. That was the motivation.
Okay. So I didn't want to hijack the meeting with that. I think the next one is probably a bigger decision. I think it's about how do we handle large plugins, large model plugins and models in time to come. And I think the concern is that there could be multiple versions of models as well as we go down the road. And I think an experience we had with classic ONOS is, these things grow and hang around forever. So I think, some of them are in, the Juniper ones came up. There's a bunch of Yang files. When it's compiled into a plugin, it's pretty big. And it can have an impact on ONOS config when you start doing linting on generated code and so on like this. So I have a few slides. Thomas, maybe if you can just fast forward.
Yep.
So this one. So basically, there are two model plugins that are like really essential to unit tests and integration tests. They're pretty small. They've tens of Yang leaves each. Then there's the device sim1 and Stratum, and they're based off OpenConfig. And device sim1 is used a lot in unit tests and integration tests, and Stratum not at all. And we're talking hundreds of Yang leaves there. And then, you know, the Juniper one came up this week. Kieran made a pull request for it, and we said, hang on, just stop for a minute. Should we be doing another repo for plugins? And if so, how do we manage it? You know, the file itself is 120 megabytes of a shared object library when it's compiled, and how do we manage it? So basically, at the moment, they're compiled with the makefile for ONOS config and deployed in the Docker image of ONOS config as well. And there are two questions really that I want to look at. So the next slide. Oh yeah, sorry, I should say we decide in the Helm chart which ones are to be loaded, you know, dynamically, but all four are embedded into the pod. Sorry, into the image, I guess, the Docker image. So I think one of the first things is, like, you know, maybe ONOS config shouldn't include the plugins inside its Docker image. You know, maybe it should, maybe for device sim, which is an essential one for test, but others, you know, maybe they should be loaded outside it. So how do you load it outside it?
Sean, just a quick thing on that. If I would say an all or nothing. If we decide to upload them from outside, it's going to be all of them, even the simulator, even if we would like to keep it inside because it's much simpler. But I would go for all or nothing.
Yeah, point taken, Andrea. Yeah. So anyway, the question remains, how do we load at deploy time? Okay. So you can load things like this through a config map, but where do you get the content for the config map? Do you put it alongside files in the Helm chart? Do you embed it into Helm charts, you know, as like binary or base 64 encoded or something like this? I think they become very big and probably not what the Helm chart was designed for. I suppose another option I was thinking of is, like, you know, maybe they should be hosted remotely, you know, somewhere on the Kubernetes cluster. I couldn't see any mechanism to pull images from a remote server, like a hosting server, into a config map.
This would just be a volume in Kubernetes. I mean, there are tons of different types of volumes that you can use, and
yeah,
this just seems equivalent to a volume, some remote file system that can be mounted to the pods.
Well, this is it. Yeah, this is true, I guess, Jordan. But you know, somebody has to configure the volume then, and is that done through a Helm chart, another Helm chart, or something like this? Maybe so. I suppose the question I was getting at is, like, you know, should we be compiling these plugins and putting them on a shared server that you can just refer to the you know, the SO at a URL, a static URL, and pull it down? How do you manage versioning for that? You know, how do you manage build for that? You know, there's a few questions there. Another option I thought about is, like, you know, maybe you just compile the model plugins into a separate Docker image, and Docker Hub is your hosting provider. So basically you pull down the Docker image and, I don't know, connect to it and pull a file from it through, I don't know, scopy or something like this, or mount or something like this. I'm not really sure what option we should use there. Another one is, I saw, was a static pod, you know, so that basically these are a kind of a Helm chart where you can just mount a static pod, particularly on one node. You could, you know, serialize the plugin into a web resource for it and pull files from it when you need to. I don't have an exact solution to these things, and you know, if people had other ideas as well, you know, I'd like to hear what people have in mind.
You know, I definitely agree that we should address this, because I think the compiling, both from build time and runtime perspective, including the model plugins in the ONOS config, is probably not tenable. Just because it would, you know, the build times will start growing out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
But
they're
also having the repo size will also grow out of control. One of the reasons for going with microservices and multiple repos was to create more autonomy for the different domains, and also to keep projects from ballooning out. So I think you should probably, you know, we could certainly, for the ONF kind of default models, like Andrea suggested, I would go with all or nothing. So maybe we have to pull out some of the test and simulator models that we have into their own repo, have a build separate for them.
Yeah.
So I think we need to address that. That's the first part. The second part is clearly how to load them at runtime. And here I really don't have any suggestions or any guidance with respect to which of the choices we should pursue. Perhaps we can just pick a simplest one and see how it works. And
yeah, we can experiment with a few things. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll try a few things. I just wanted to kind of put these out there, see if I was missing something obvious. I mean, what the things I'm suggesting here, like in number 2 and 3, really, yes, they're 1 and 2. I mean, they are mounted as volumes, but how do you get the volume there is the question, and where's the file pulled from? So I mean, I can do either one of the first 2 and see if it's a satisfactory, or if it becomes high maintenance. I can probably work with Jordan on that one.
yeah.
We ran into, over in Cord, we ran into similar things with XOS GUI and also classic ONOS apps for distributing binaries. What really informed us was the mechanism for doing version updates to those tools, and how that would work, what needs to be restarted or changed, and that really helped inform what options to take. I'll just say that using volumes was brought up, but because it's hard to use those in a testing situation if they're persistent and need to span multiple hosts, that was somewhat problematic. Feel free to ping either me or I think Matteo worked on at least the ONOS or the GUI portion of that. So.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. That would be good. That's it. Okay, so the second item that I had on that, then Thomas, is on the next page. So yeah, this is about whether we put it into a separate repo, you know, and I suppose I was looking at the feasibility of compiling the plugins, you know, on a separate build cycle than ONOS config itself. So I think there needs to be a certain level of compatibility there. Otherwise, the shared object library, you'll just get an error when you try to load it, and ONOS config won't start. So I think the Go version has to be the same. Probably the module dependencies has to be the same, and you know, how we coordinate that, I'm not fully sure at the moment. And then there was a question: what do you do with the built artifact? You know, is it something that we can put up on file hosting? Is there a file hosting provider we currently use? You know, in a similar way to, like, we're publishing our images to Docker Hub. Is there a file hosting service that we use?
I think you can host things on GitHub, but I really don't know anything about it. There's always Maven Central. That's another option.
Yeah. I mean, could
I
be
think
something
you
that
can put them on GitHub as resources. You would basically have, I think, to version them. Possibly.
Yeah, you can create a GitHub release and then push binary artifacts along with that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that.
But it's good to create a version somehow, a tag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that might be the most feasible then.
I think
Yeah.
there's a 1 gigabyte limit per binary object, but I don't think you're going to hit that.
No, we're not going to hit.
Another
yeah.
possibility is, I suppose, is to deploy them as self-serving images, right? Where basically the principal artifact is the SO.
Yeah.
But it could potentially be deployed on a kind of a self-serving Docker image, right? That has basically a server through that you contact it and it'll give you the SO.
Yeah, that could be an option.
That way, each basically compiled model is effectively kind of self-contained.
In a way that's very kind of similar to how ONOS config is deployed as well. Yeah, there is a benefit to that, I think, for sure.
But it does require a little bit of a kind of a quote template to be expected, template behavior to be expected from a model or Dockers.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I'll look into those options if nobody has like any objections or any radically different ideas of how it could be done.
Yeah, and I think a benefit of treating the test or simulator images, simulator models or plugins the same way like we would treat everything else is that we can use them to work out the scheme.
How do you mean, Thomas?
Well, what I mean is that we basically the ONOS config starts without any models, and we can use the existing small models that we have as a vehicle to verify that our deployment mechanism for other models.
Yeah.
Basically, it would be uniform treatment of everything. I think that was what was behind Andreas' suggestion. Or nothing.
Very good. Okay, I don't think I have another slide. Can you just check? No.
Just can I make one small comment on that? I was looking today at the build time problems that you mentioned, Sean, when we added in the big model and it took a long time. I think the problem there was that the linter was the bit that was killing us, and I realized later that the linter is not supposed to do anything for the auto-generated files because it looks at the first line, which says this is a generated file, do not edit, and it's not supposed to do anything, but that the linter that we use is not smart enough to really ignore it. So it actually analyzes it, uses gigabytes of memory, takes like many minutes, and then it doesn't do anything. But I was playing around just before this meeting with adding a build tag. I found an example on the web where somebody else had done that, and using the build tag, we can get it to really ignore those generated files. So it goes down from like many minutes to like a few seconds the way it was before. And that might be something even, as we could do anyway, sort of separate from, the bigger, longer term solution.
Yeah, that would be useful in the longer term solution, I think, for sure. That would have been useful to know previously. So
I already have to do some filtering and other garbage to not fail to build over the generated code. I would love to just not. There's no reason to lint generated code.
Well, I think that we don't lint the generated code. That's the thing, that we don't generate any linter errors for the generated code, but the problem is that the linter doesn't decide that until the very end, but we can use these tags so it doesn't do anything with that code at all, not even
Great.
groundwork.
Yeah, if you could post that someplace or check in a PR or something, I'll look at working it into the main ONOS config. That would be great. Or just do it. If you know how to do it, just make the changes.
I was going to add it. Well, the reason I'm sort of pushing here is that I was hoping to get these µONOS files committed, and I can't get it to pass the CI build at the moment. But if I make this change, I think I can pass the CI build and get that in, hopefully, and then everything could all get moved at the one time.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Some of us have magic powers. We can make it happen. Don't tell anyone, but we can make it happen.
Okay. So just to clarify, then the Juniper models would be currently checked in an existing place under ONOS config repo, and then over time, the idea is to extricate them in their own repo, right?
Well, just in the same place that you move the other ones to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the thing is, I'm wondering whether we need to have a single repository for all the models, or whether we should have each kind of a major model suite have its own repo.
Well, I think some people will probably want to keep their model plugins external anyway. So I'm not inclined to go a repo per model, because like it just becomes cumbersome. I mean, most of the time really it's just, you know, we have the capability of handling multiple models in one repo, and I think that should be the rule, and then people can make exception as they feel like it.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. All right. So yeah, thanks for letting me air those issues. I think that's the first order of business, is to copy the stuff I have out into a new repo, and then I'll start looking at how we can package the stuff and you know, extract it from the Docker build of ONOS config.
Is there an issue to track that we can add to the milestone, post-release milestone?
I'll add an issue.
Okay. And again, post-release is fine, right? Post 1.0?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Sean. I mean, this is really good to catch that early, to kind of start building the mechanism to scale this better.
Yeah. Kieran, just on that point about the release, I'm kind of reluctant to check in the Junos yangs before the release. I think things are stable where they are, and we're very close to the release. Thomas, do you have a date?
Well, no, I mean, that's the thing, is we need to run at least one or two 0.x releases, right? In order to be able to cut the 1x, in order to kind of work the release process through. But
okay, look, I'll tell you what we can do is we'll check in the Junos yangs, but we won't include them in the build by default, maybe.
Sure.
Okay, we will just take your advice, whatever approach you think is the best.
Yeah. I'll sync up with you on Slack over that.
Yeah,
I'm aware I'm eating into the meeting time here. I'll let other people have their say.
I mean, that's okay. I mean, I think this is important to figure out, right? I mean, we want to make sure that you know, the different aspects are covered. So the release is only one thing, but I also don't want to stop the developer workflow, right? Either.
Okay.
So I think checking it in is perfectly fine. Maybe excluding it from the default build, that's easy to compensate for. Just, you know, make something, right?
Yeah.
And then we can figure out long term how we deal with the whole plugin stuff down the line.
Very good.
Because I know it's a pain to be holding outstanding PRs and outstanding branches and continue to rebase them. That's no fun. So, all right.
Okay.
Good. Thanks, Sean. So, well, we already covered this. Unfortunately, I didn't realize we had a slide for it. So, Adi provided the update without the visual support here. Benchmarks.
Yeah.
Jordan, you want to take that?
Yeah. If I could share my screen, actually.
Absolutely. Participants, do you need to do anything here?
It seems like I can do it, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
There we go. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that we haven't worked on in ONOS config was benchmarks. So testing the throughput and scale and latency. And so I began doing that right before the Christmas break. And so I basically finished up the benchmarking tool, which is in ONIT. It's very similar to the test tool, but basically it just runs something over and over and over and measures the latency and throughput. So the benchmarking tool has support for scaling the number of clients basically by adding pods inside Kubernetes, scaling the number of Go routines that are running inside each pod that makes requests. And I'll show some examples of what the actual benchmarks look like. And then benchmarks can specify configurable arguments. Like for example, there are some atomics benchmarks for distributed maps, and you can configure the number of keys that you're using in the benchmark, the size of the keys, the size of the values, etc. So we can measure different sizes of data and things like that, and scale. And then it outputs latency and throughput. And there are some benchmarks written for Raft and ONOS config. I'll show you an example of the ONOS config benchmarks. So inside the ONOS, let me make this bigger. Inside the ONOS config benchmark, the repository. So currently, my laptop's going slow. Hold on. So currently, integration tests are under this tests directory. There's now a benchmark directory which has a similar set of suites, and so in here is the GNMI northbound benchmark suite. So there are just two benchmarks right now, one for GNMI sets and one for gets. And this is all the benchmark looks like. So basically it defines a function to run an argument. So this is basically repeatedly setting the message of the day banner, and onit is generating a random 8-character string telling the benchmark to send it to ONOS config and then measuring the output. And the way this is run, I'm not going to run it right now because it takes some time, but this is an example command that I just ran right before this meeting. Basically, I mean, it's very similar to the integration test command. You give it an image to run, which contains the test that I just showed. There's a GNMI suite in there. You could specify the specific method to run. You can specify a duration for which to run the benchmark or a number of requests, like you can say 10,000 requests, the number of workers to run. So each worker is basically a pod running inside Kubernetes. And so you can run with 10 or 100 worker pods that are all hitting the northbound API at the same time. And then you can override different arguments. And what it spits out is this down here. So once it runs all the benchmark methods, it'll give you the throughput, latency, etc. And that's about it. Yeah, and so I have benchmarks I've benchmarked Raft, the underlying Raft implementation, and then the ONOS config northbound API. And what this found was a lot of, as part of that, I fixed a lot of bugs or a lot of inefficiencies in the ONOS config northbound API. So I added, I think last week I added a lot of caching. So basically changes that are sent to the northbound are replayed, and there's a state machine maintained inside of ONOS config now. So reads don't have to replay any changes to get the state for some path. They just read from the state machine that's replayed from the source. And both writes and reads throughput increased by 2 orders of magnitude doing that. And now we're far surpassed the benchmarks that we have for ONOS config now. So everything's looking much better.
This is great, Jordan. This is awesome.
Yeah.
That's it. So yeah, I mean, well, we have a lot more benchmarks to add, but everything this seems to have found and allowed me to fix a lot of issues, and we're looking pretty good. And I also this particular test sets up 1 device simulator per worker. So if you look at, let me see the suite. So inside the suite, there are setup methods also. And so setup suite is called once for the entire test suite, and then setup benchmark is called on each worker for each method. And so this is adding a simulator per worker. And so when I run it with 30 workers, it runs it with 30 simulators, and it maintains the same performance as with 1 simulator. So it's looking pretty good in terms of scale also.
That's awesome.
Jordan, I also think it's really cool that you are able in the benchmarks to use those GNMI utilities that we wrote.
Yeah.
Because it makes this code all look the same between unit tests and benchmarks, which I think is really great.
Yeah, it's really concise, and I was able to test a ton of stuff, a ton of different scenarios with the benchmark. So I really like how it turned out.
Yeah, me too. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
I'm just thinking this will be extremely helpful in kind of quantifying the performance, especially in a RAN use case, right, where latency and throughput will be.
Yeah, it was easy. Yeah, it was easy to hit our benchmarks in this case, but yeah, this will become more valuable.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, just having the kind of the proof of
Yep.
to test the system performance from outside, but under stress as well, and a fairly fine grain with respect to each type of request. So that way we'll be able to really easily quantify and say, yes, we are meeting our goals or not. That's awesome.
Thomas, I wonder if I could share the image of the GUI that I took while the benchmark was running.
Absolutely, yeah. You should be able to seize control, I think.
Yeah.
That was cool.
So can you see this?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, so basically I ran Jordan's simple, that one path change on the benchmark and let it run on my system for 10 minutes. And then I attached the GUI to it. And as you can see, I got a very, very long list of network changes. There were actually 8,300 changes, I think, across 10 different devices, and you can see, you know, how they're scattered among the different devices because of, I think, the number that he puts in here. And you can see there's the odd one there that the device change stayed in pending for some reason. Now in this particular view, it's a very, very long screenshot, but this is that's the scroll bar there, that orange block, showing you like
Wow.
how little of the total we're actually looking at. So I think we're probably looking at 80 maybe here, and that's just like, you know, 100 the whole size. So it's pretty heavyweight configuration. And I think I did a snapshot on it then, and it collapsed it down just into one snapshot, which is like a really great visualization of how the snapshot process works, and the robustness of it as well.
Awesome.
Very good. Thanks.
Thanks, Jordan. This is excellent. Do we have anything else? Let me.
Library functions.
Library functions.
Yeah.
Yes.
And build if we want to talk about it, but we can defer that if we need to.
No, I think we have. We still have time. We still have like 15 minutes or so.
It will be quick this one.
Yes. So do you want to? That's for you to talk about, right, Adi?
We have a slide there. If you.
So yeah, I just need to.
I can.
Do you want me to share it, or?
See if I can share my screen.
You should be able to share your screen.
You see it now or not?
Do you have it, or do you want me to? Let me know.
My browser is preventing to share. Probably.
Oh, you know what? That's probably we have to do the same thing as I had to do before. So let's go in here. Where were we? There it is.
Okay. So something else that I want to bring it up, and probably we should address it before moving forward with other subsystems, is that common library functions, especially the log package. So currently in ONOS config, we use ZAP as the log package, but in other subsystems, we use JLog or glog or all. So we need to make sure that we use a consistent logging package. So something which is done in open code project, probably Zach also can give comments on this, is that they have a repository for common library functions that is used across multiple repos. So the most important one is the log package. But probably as we move forward, probably we need to add some utility functions that can be used across multiple repos. So the reason that I bring it up because currently the Zap log package is a simple one, but we can extend the interface to customize it to have a good logging package. So probably we can adopt a log package which is used in the Volta project. They extended the interface, so it's a really beautiful package that is extended there. And probably with minor changes we can customize it with ONit. So what I would suggest, probably a separate repo, or probably we can rename the build tools repo to something more generic to include both. Because what we need is just a package directory and to include those packages. So I don't know, probably we can accommodate it in the build tools repo, or if it would be better to have a separate repo for the library packages, we can create a separate repo for that. So, but my point is that for common library functions, we need to have a separate thing and it should be consistent in all repos, because in ONOS test, we want to see the log, right? So we should have a common log package that if we extend it to use it for collecting logs or all of this stuff, so the log package should be the same for all of the subsystems.
Yeah, I definitely see that this would help across the board with reusing some of the boilerplate code that we're repeating. I mean, we saw that even with like CLI, right, with the command handlers.
Yeah.
So the CLI was both the umbrella as well as we couldn't put the base libraries there because it was the umbrella.
Yeah.
And you cannot really have a project that's both. So having a place for common libraries that would be definitely something that's good. As to whether you're repurposing the build tools or creating a separate library, I mean, I don't really have a
I don't know what's the correct approach to move forward. I don't know what happens for the build tools repo in the future. Or do we add lots of scripts there and it will be a big repo, or?
Yeah, let's leave them separate right now because we can. I think it's going to be easier to merge them than to split them apart. If we decide to change our mind later, so let's start with them separate.
Yeah. All right.
Hey Zach, I'm just looking at the Volta library. I'm assuming you're familiar with it. You guys actually grab the sources you like and then check them in and then version them on your own, it looks like. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a debate whether you should include the year output of Go mod in the vendors folder, whether you should check in your vendors folder. The big issue is, do you want somebody to have to rerun the mod tool, and can you guarantee that all those packages are available, or the modules that are available? I think there are people who go back and forth either way. Even the Go mod documentation talks about this, about whether or not you should is a project by project decision. One of the other things that is worth considering, well, there are a few things. One is, I think I'm behind putting this in a separate repo, because then you can version it and do dependencies and atomically jump from version to version. Right. The other consideration is for logging. Has anyone looked at some of the distributed tracing support for logging specifically?
Jaeger. Yeah, I know Teo was really excited about Jaeger when he got back from KubeCon, but he struggled with it.
There's a bunch of open tracing stuff that oftentimes interacts with logging libraries. So if you guys are going to be changing out all your logging across the board, you might look at implementing a tracing library as a part of in conjunction with that.
Yeah, I think we would love to be able to trace like a gRPC request all the way through. I think that would be awesome. The question is when we get to the point where we put the work in to do it.
Right, right. And one other thing is, right now, I haven't looked at the µONOS code in a while. The protobuf output, are you checking in the protobuf output, or on build, are you rebuilding from protos to your Go code?
Currently check it in, and I find that distasteful, but that's the way it works currently.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we've had issues with the repeatability depending on your Go on the protobuf toolchain version. It generates a different code.
Well, we control that by building the make protos builds in a Docker image.
Right, right, yeah. So we've had issues with that, and then we're moving in that direction as well.
Yeah.
So I guess you may want to also version your protos in this way, and then distribute them as a part of your library, and rather than if they're not being shared, or depending on how they're being distributed to your different components.
Okay.
Well, so I think what I would suggest, we basically set up a repo for the libraries. So it'll be like ONOS. We can just use a similar pattern like ONOS Go, and that's where we can basically put kind of the mixed bag of Go code that's just applicable for across in appropriate packages clearly, right? But that really ought not to have, that code ought not to have any dependencies on any other ONOS repos, right?
Yes.
That's a little bit of it, because you can really easily get into chicken and egg.
Yeah.
So they'll really have, by very nature of that, there will be fairly low-level libraries. So there'll be libraries that will have to be dealing with generic interfaces, right? Generic type objects, rather than be specific to something, let's say, that ONOS config has or ONOS ran has.
So the utility functions that are specific for one or two repos should be
In those
shipped in. So, but I'm talking about, for example, log package can be used across all of the repos.
But I mean, there can be things outside of logging, right? There's plenty of other stuff that.
Yeah, the other one that I see a lot is assertion packages. We use a bunch of different ones. Unit tests use some, integration tests use some.
Yeah,
we should just pick one.
Packages. There is
Just
one
stick with it.
There is one testify.
We should just pick one and go with it, and just so the code all looks the same. So okay.
Yeah, that's great.
So I can, I'll just create ONOS Go, just like using this sort of naming convention on an ONOS project.
Yeah.
After the meeting, and then you guys can take seize control of that.
Ray and I.
And we'll leave the build two separate for now, and if you need to merge it, we can merge it.
Yeah, we will decide it later. Yeah.
All right. So
4
is
minutes
that
left.
it?
Well, there's the build environment thing. I can do that very quickly.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
So the recent back and forth about the new repo got me thinking again about our build environment, and I kind of like the way that the new plugin is using the common make file. I think that's a really good way to go. But then that got me thinking about, well, if you're going to write code, why be embedding shell scripts inside of make files? Why not just go to Bazel? And so I just wanted to bring it up again. When we switched to Bazel for ONOS Classic, there were compelling performance reasons to do it. We were basically stressing out Buck to the point where it was non-functional, particularly doing release pushes. Bazel is not going to bias that much in terms of build time, I don't think, for these projects. However, I did a little bit of research, and Bazel out of the box now supports protobuf compilation, it supports Docker image manipulation, it supports Helm charts, it supports all this stuff that we're talking about writing either scripting or make rules for this release process. And I just kind of wanted to bring it up to the group here about what do people think? Do they think it's worth investigating another build tool? Are we happy with make?
We have experience with Bazel, so we know that the benefits that you enumerated, right? Performance, not so much here, because things are going to be small code basis reasonably, and not much need for parallelism. But in terms of encapsulating kind of the conventions and common steps to treat different types of targets, that would be a huge benefit to kind of.
Also, the multi-repo aspect of Bazel, you know, if we had rules, like say we had rules to push Docker images, we could write those as rules files, have their own repo for them, have everybody use them, and they would only be in one place. I think that would be a big win going forward, particularly if we start supporting things like RAM, which will have their own apps and whatever. This is a cascading problem, right? We're going to have this problem where this common make rules thing is going to be working its way into a lot of different parts of the system.
Yeah, I think it would be really great, Ray. And with that plugins thing, I mean, I think it would have really helped there. You know, especially because it's got it's got knowledge of Docker and it's got, you know, knowledge of Go and all that kind of thing. It's really, really good.
Yeah. So, Karen and you guys, you've had obviously a lot of experience with Make. What is your feeling on this? Do you have any sort of thumbs up, thumbs down on this idea?
I'm a bit unsure we haven't used Bazel. I mean, we're using make files mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I've seen it in the ONOS Classic, and I had to learn how to use it or learn a little bit about it. I'm not really in a good position to give a recommendation here.
Okay, so are there any sort of things that make your life miserable about Make that maybe we could think about, and does Bazel help us with them?
I mean, I guess one question is the manipulation of the modules in Go. Would Bazel have a better approach to those than what we currently have with Make?
So there's a couple of options there. There's something called Bazel, which basically is very similar to what ONOS libgen does for the existing Java code in ONOS Classic. It basically reads through your sources, generates a list of library rules, and then that's your workspace. So that's one way to do it. Obviously, if you want to write the rules yourself, you have all the control you need. The question is whether you want to do that. So I think it's probably similar to using the Go mod file. I don't think there's a big win there one way or the other.
Yeah, right, okay. And previously in ONOS Classic, I mean, you guys wrote a lot of BZL files, like rules files.
Rules, yeah.
Yeah, do you think there would be a need to do a few of them here, or like, would you expect to get everything out of the box?
So, you know, I started going through Andrea's document. That's another reason that this kind of got tickled in my head again, is I started going through Andrea's document about all the different things that would have to be done. You know, we'd be writing a bunch of shell scripts, or in the case of Bazel, you'd be writing a bunch of Python, which for me is preferable just because it's a more robust environment, right? Once you're inside of the Bazel tool, you have access to dependencies and other information that might make your life easier. But I don't know that for a fact. I can't say coming out, you know, hey, this is worth the effort. For ONOS Classic, I knew it was, just because we'd be saving everybody build time. For this one, I think it's more of a, do we think down the road we're going to have to do things more complicated, and let's just do it now before we are stuck with supporting the make files. That was kind of what my feeling was.
Yeah, and I think we're at a crossroads as well. I mean, that common.mk that Damien checked in during the week, that kind of set off alarm bells for me in one way, is like, do we commit to one or do we commit to the other?
Right, and that's exactly what it was. I had a little bit of a discussion with Damien, and he was like, well, we didn't really want to put shell scripts into the build, and I can totally see that, because that way you're dealing with one technology and you want everything up front. But I just feel like make and shell is, I'm sorry, I think that's the wrong technology. So anyway, if we think it's worth it, once the release is out, I can spend some time on this, since I did the original port of ONOS Classic. The question is, A, do we think it's worth it? And B, do we think it's going to save us time in when we start having to do RAM and we start having to do apps?
Yeah. So a question really, maybe it's for Jordan, is like, how does it affect ONIT, or is it something that can help with ONIT?
I don't think it helps or doesn't help. I think it's neutral.
Well, the thing we could do is like the integration tests right now are a little shell script and then a little blob of YAML that goes into the Travis file and blah, blah, blah. That could all just be one. That's very easy to make that one Bazel command. So then it would basically get rid of some of this cruft that we, this like Thomas was saying, this boilerplate stuff where, ONOS config has almost exactly the same shell script as ONOS test, as ONOS topo. And that problem is just going to get worse and worse. I have a feeling that if we do it right, Bazel will help us with that problem.
Yeah, and I mean, you can draw the dependency graph out of it. There's a lot of benefits to, to having it. You know where stuff is. But even on ONIT, I mean, it's probably something you could wrap in a Bazel target, like if you wanted to, as a bin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way we do the thing now in ONOS Classic, where you can run Carafe locally, that maps down to a Bazel run command. We could do exactly that, like for the integration tests. Deploy your kind cluster, build your stuff, run it. That all could be done inside of Bazel.
Yeah. I think it's.
I would definitely think that it's worth at least after release. Then why don't we just for at least prior to release, my primary concern is consistency, just to keep things consistent. After the release. Meaning before the release, I don't think we should be changing things or committing in any directions.
Yes, I agree.
Just leave things as they are, even though they may not be perfect, and just make a release from that. And after release, then what we should do is then pick a repo and then try to, with the Go code in it, and just basically get this built with minimal Bazel rules. See if it can, and the Bazel rules there, see if we can find off-the-shelf ones that encapsulate most of what it is that we're doing today, which is protos, Go compilation, unit testing, and
Docker manipulation can be done.
Exactly, those sorts of things, right?
So then I think what I'll do is when we go through this process of having figure out how to do this release, quote unquote, manually, I'll try to script that all up so that way we'll know kind of everything we have, and then we can use that to tell us if Bazel is the right tool.
And then we can think about extracting the commonalities for all the repo and applying it over time to all of the repos for consistency. And now, when I say over time, it probably means, just over a week. Just not a protracted amount of time.
I mean, the benefit is that the two can sit side by side.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah, and it doesn't have to disturb any ongoing development that's going.
Yeah, we actually supported Bazel and Buck builds for what, 2 releases, was it?
Yeah, well, we didn't want to do that. We want to deprecate one right after the other one. Not before, right? So, and then if through the process of going to Bazel, we decide that things are more awkward than we imagine them to be, then we can avoid.
Just kill it. Yep, I agree. All right.
Because I mean, clearly, Make is sufficiently flexible. It's been around for forever, but it may not. Again,
it's widely available. And it definitely
it's
has
the lowest common denominator, right? It's so in that regard, it's great, but and it certainly served us okay for now. But I think, I'm leery of having convoluted make files.
Yep. All right, that's it for that topic. Was that it for all of them, I think?
Yeah, I think so. We're a little bit past the time. This thing didn't kick us off, so that's good. That's good to know. But I think there's not a meeting coming to this room, so we better wrap it up. So again, this was a mishmash of topics, but it was a great discussion. Thanks everybody for contributing, and we'll see you in the next one in 2 weeks. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.